Okay, my name is Bradley Cooper, and I have the great pleasure of talking with Cate Blanchett, Todd Field, and Nina Hoss, who are two of the actors and the writer, producer, and director of Tar. Hello.
Hello, Bradley.
Hello.
Hi.
As a lover of film, it's, if I was 12 years old and I was watching this movie, it would have been the thing that made me want to be in this art form. It's that kind of film. I was devastated after it was over, and it stayed with me. And like all the great films, when you watch it a second time, it's almost as if you're watching it for the first time. And that's the way it felt this morning when I watched it. And that's a testament to clearly all the work that you have done. I haven't read anything on the film. I tend not to do that. I just want to sort of treat it my own personal relationship with the piece. But I can only imagine that how much time you, Todd, must have spent on this project. And as actors, we all we try to do is not act, right? That's the goal. And when we pull that off, that's fulfilling. But then there's that other thing that sometimes happens once in a movie, but it felt to me that it was happening throughout this entire film, which is that everybody was just channeling. Cate, I've had the great honor of working with you, and I didn't recognize you one frame of this film. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about acting. The face changes, the eyes change, the breath changes, and I was just mesmerized. And Nina, I am not so familiar with your other work, so to me, you just were the person. So it was insane.
Thank you.
I'd like to just begin. Why the accordion? Such an interesting choice. We see it on the mantle, so clearly that was one of the beginning instruments.
Well, this character is from Staten Island, and I imagine that she grew up, near Fresh Kills, which was the largest landfill for many years before it was reclamated sort of beautifully. And she was probably the child of immigrant parents, that would go down to the local, the Hungarian social club or whatever. And very often you would find the first entryway into music would be an instrument that was affordable and had a sense of tradition. And in this case would be the accordion. Wow.
And therein lies a perfect example of an answer that is so specific. And because of that, I, as a viewer, it just deepened everything for me. And I think that was also every composition, the movement of the camera. I mean, to me, a successful movie has to be believable, not realistic, but believable and rhythmic. And those two elements are key. Otherwise, a movie has no chance. And this was just from the very beginning when you are talking to you're asking somebody not to be aware of the microphone. Is that correct?
Yes, in the very beginning. Yes.
Yes, in the very beginning. Yeah, pretend the microphone's not there. Yeah, it's just Nina. A quick question for you: when Lydia proposes the cello as the second piece, as the accompanying piece of music, and you sort of close your eyes, are you I thought that was just a brilliant moment because I felt like I was watching her listen to the music to see if the two would marry each other.
You got it. Yeah.
You're literally like, wait, would it work? It was just amazing.
Would it go together? Oh, wow.
Yes.
A split second. You got it.
It was amazing. Why the shade on MTT?
Well, because, I think we all, or many of us, have our sort of dragons, or people that we feel have somehow, maybe have a bigger career than us, or people whose work they think has been overpraised. So it's a very petty moment for this character. I personally think MTT is incredible, and I've listened to pieces he's conducted for years and watched films on MTT, and I have no beef against him. It's just she's that's her thing. I don't know.
And one more, and then I promise to stop asking the sort of
the insider baseball questions, given what you've just been doing.
Crazy fanatic collections. What is? I didn't understand the book that what that meant. Is that a maze that she wrote in the introduction? What is that?
It's a book by Vita Sackville West, and Vita Sackville West. Do you know anything about her, Bradley? She was an important writer, an interesting writer. She came from a sort of high-flown British family, had a very, very complicated relationship, to say the least, with her husband. And if you've seen or read Virginia Woolf's Orlando, that's sort of based on Vita Sackville West. They were lovers. And that book, Challenge, I won't spoil it for anybody, but if you read it, you'll understand immediately why thematically there's a sort of parallel in terms of what's going on with her.
And is that a maze, or is that some sort of emblem?
A Cate pattern. A Cate pattern is a form of expression, and like the Icaros that she talks about in the film, that come from the Shipibo-Konibo people. So they're very specific patterns, and they have different meanings. Some are, for a anaconda pattern or this or that pattern, but they're very, very specific, and they're generated from single shamans. So in the same way that the Icaro, the song, is from a single sort of place. And she makes a lot about this in that first interview with Adam Gottlieb, about being on the same side as the spirit that created the song. And so there's a whole,
like a fingerprint in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So everyone has a Cate pattern, and when those Icaro are sung, the Cate patterns are often woven. And I thought about Tar. I don't know if we even discussed this, Todd, but I thought about her as being someone whose Cate was broken. And if there's a fracture in your Cate, it means that there's a crisis, an impending crisis in some way. And not that that's a negative thing, because sometimes crisis, as we all know, sometimes the old midlife crisis can lead to better, new, fresher horizons. But that Cate is a very kind of something it's in there. It's not an Easter egg, but it is it's a really important part of her backstory, I guess.
The thing that it must have been very appetizing for both of you as actors and everybody else who's in the movie, because to me, all the characters had so much depth that they were shocking me at every turn in terms of their behavior. One moment was when we learn, unless I'm mistaken, that you pay for your mentor's private car, and that it's not the orchestra, it's not the company that pays for it. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, because it's.
Which I love, because you don't expect that she would do that, but she sort of understands the system.
She understands the system and the way the system has changed. I mean, it's the way these people have as you know, like the maestros of the past were. It's a little bit like ex-presidents. Were still treated like gods and part of the system. But of course, with the fall of the wall in Germany, and Nina, you'd know much more about this than I would, but the whole sense of the democratic process of music making into a kind of an old hierarchical structure, some people fall through the cracks. And given her relationship with the character of Andrus, who has been really kind of in a way helped her get the job, recommended her for the position, she felt that he wasn't being looked after in the way that the position deserved. So it's a small act of kindness, as you say, that is unexpected.
Well, just that have that sort of sensitivity for somebody else other than herself when we're watching her wield power throughout the first quarter of the film in different ways. And then also the same thing when the affront to your character seemed to be that she didn't share with you. I wasn't that was the cheating more than anything else. And the way you handled that, Nina, was just I thought incredible. To that end, Todd, I can't even imagine what went into how difficult it was to make this film, to get this film made. It just looked like everything was a location. I didn't see it. To me, nothing looked like a set. I can't even imagine. Can you just talk a little bit about from the kernel of the idea and how rigorous and arduous rather it must have been to make this film?
Well, actually, surprisingly simple. I mean, it was hard for all of us collectively. And yes, there are many locations, very fine locations, and there are some very, very fine sets that are built into those locations by Marco Bittner-Rosser and his art department. But it's it was a strange one. It was like the studio essentially said yes very quickly, and then Cate agreed to play this part, and then another wave of a pandemic hit. So we had 9 months. That was the hard part, was waiting, So Cate, had that time to prepare which was essential. So that was a blessing. But I think the greatest challenges for the film were really put upon Cate and Nina and the rest of the cast, because this is all diegetic music. It's everything you see, everything you hear is real time. There's no alternate takes. It's all happening, so there was a great deal of sort of practical skill that the cast had to have.
So when you say just for like everybody watching, what does that mean? Is it another way of saying like it's played live? So it's not is that what you mean?
Correct. Yes. Everything, what you see is what you get. If this character is playing the piano, she's playing the piano. If she's conducting the orchestra, that's the orchestra in real time. If Nina's playing, she's playing. If Sophie Kauer, the cellist, is playing, that's all real. So it was a big challenge for us, because we had to start with the orchestra, and Cate and I had naturally talked about this idea that we would save that for the very end of the shoot. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you're well acquainted with, these orchestras have very, very strict rules. And they're used to only rehearsing for 2.5 hours. They take a break, 2.5 hours, and then that's it. And when we said we need you for 10-hour days, they said, "Are you crazy? We already know this music." And we said, no, not for playing, for acting. Because one of the things that was really important to us collectively was that they not feel like a band for hire, that they feel like they're part of the story. So for instance, the lead cellist, Gosha, who's usurped by Tar when she brings in this young cellist, and the lead clarinetist who's on the board, Knut, that she has these scenes with, they're both in the Dresden Philharmonic. Gosha plays the cello for them, and her name is Dorothea, and Fabian, who plays Knut, is is the lead clarinetist. So it was really about trying to gel with them in a very, very short amount of time. So, Cate can speak to the challenges, and Nina can speak to the challenges that they had with this orchestra. But in terms of production, what was difficult is we had to do 95 camera setups the first day, and so that was like a John Madden football game, and what that's like, and we only had the orchestra for 9 days. So, it was like for the whole show. So once we got past those 9 days, we kind of felt like, we've summited. We're at well done. But then we had another 45 days of shooting ahead of us, and we were wrecked, So that was, in terms of production, that was probably the greatest challenge.
And that was on the front side?
Front side, day one.
Yeah. Day one. Wow. Yeah. We've talked about this, Bradley, about, how slow often the preparation is, and how I know how you work, and it's like it's really great to have time to allow these things to percolate. And I'd said we'd talked about it, Todd, and saying it'd be great to save that stuff till last, once we've kind of got a lot of the stuff under the belt. But in a way, strangely, somehow it was a gift, because it allowed me to know what the stakes were, what she was risking losing, and just how important and life-affirming, what that's like when you stand in front of the orchestra and you get that sound coming back at you. It keeps you alive. It's kind of, it's like no other form of it's veracity personified, or there's nothing like it. So it's, in a way, it's set the stakes for what she was trying to cling on to. Was it power, or was it the ability to have this life force moving through her? So, and also, it's a strange gift too, because then, the waves of the pandemic, then later on, the orchestra started dropping like flies, and it was this strange magical window where otherwise we wouldn't have been able to have those scenes at all. I was lucky.
For me, it was beautiful, just to add something, to see what this couple, where they met, and what they love doing together. So being able to shoot these scenes first, where they do together what their passion is, where I can explore how much Sharon really organizes around Lydia, and also enables, how she sees what she wants, how she tries to get it from the orchestra without Lydia having to get into the nitty-gritty bits. That's Sharon's kind of terrain. So that was just, it was so beautiful at the end of the day, even though we were scared of doing this first thing, that we go back to the apartment and we know come from the rehearsals. We have them in us. We know what kind of we felt sitting in this orchestra, playing with them and hearing the sound, like Cate says, we have that all in us. And then that can enter into the scenes that we have in private. So it was, at the end of the day, really helpful.
To that degree, of those first 9 days, that would have meant that rehearsal of the of Mahler 5 was one of those 9 days, I assume. Then,
no, we had one proper rehearsal day, and that was it. One proper rehearsal day.
I mean, the rehearsal scene. Sorry,
the rehearsal scenes. Well, yeah, I mean, there in the rehearsal scenes, there's a section. There's 3 sections, and that the first day, the 95 camera setups, was meant to be rehearsal day 1, and but in terms of actually rolling into rehearsal day 1, Cate was she was practicing baton technique and all of that for 9 months. But when we got to Berlin, typically I want 3 or 4 weeks to rehearse. I mean, to rehearse proper scene work, not music, and because this got all front loaded, that all turned on its head. So instead of being in a rehearsal room working on scenes, and we did, but mostly it got cut in half. So it would be Nina sitting with a violin, Cate in front of a full-length mirror with a baton, Sophie sitting with a cello, and an accompanist, acting and standing in for the orchestra, and having to go through this music. Cate only had 1 full day with that orchestra before she was there and having to command them for the next 9 days. It was extraordinary.
I'm having worked on a project in the same world.
Yes,
the level of respect I have for that world and that podium. It is the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and it's so odd because so many people. I don't know if you've come across this, but people that I have in the last 5 years have said, like, "What does a conductor even do? Like, aren't you just up there sort of doing this?" And my answer is, the absolute hardest thing you could possibly ever want to do. It is impossible. You made it look so. Not only did you make the conducting look easy, but the rehearsal, the rhythm of the rehearsal and the way you wrote and filmed it was just so appetizing on every level as a viewer. It was truly mind blowing. Not forget just switching from German to English, but the rhythms and how I felt like you were thinking in real time, everything. I don't, there's no one else ever that could ever play that role, and the musicality that you have, I don't know, Todd, if you think this, but having worked with Cate, also thinking it before, but having worked with her, you're so musical, you're so rhythmic as an actor with language. I felt like when we did our scenes, it was almost as if we were just playing instruments with each other. And to see that infused in, see that, harnessed for this movie was just so appetizing, particularly those rehearsal scenes.
It's always dangerous when we talk about this, especially when we're with each other, because, it's like it's cover your ears moment. But I still, even after all this time, and obviously I've seen the film down hundreds of times, whenever a scene comes up, like yesterday, I had to review something and a scene came up. And, it's exactly what you're citing, seeing Cate on the podium, running the orchestra through their paces, and all of a sudden that idea of invisibility, like this character, forget about what this character is like spiritually, philosophically, or otherwise, where those differences lie between the person portraying this person and the person. But it's so wildly different than Cate Blanchett's rhythms in real life. I mean, it has nothing to do with her. And you have to marvel, like, where does she keep that? Where did it come from? How did she hear it? How did, and it's like somebody that, it's like having Miles Davis that can win the Grammy for Best Classical Musician of the Year and Best Jazz Musician of the Year. And it's all the same to them, it really, it's quite something.
All of that comes from the music. I mean, you must have found that. I mean, I don't yet know, and I can't wait to see your film about Bernstein. But the music makes you move differently Like
This is
in the fifth.
this is your inner metronome. Lydia's inner metronome has a rhythm. The way she blows out the candles at the apartment, the old apartment maintains. The ceremony before she goes out, it's all the same. I mean, you start playing music at the beginning of the film when you're interviewed. I mean, the musicality to the way you are talking about everything. I mean, it's. I mean, I was just floored. And in fact, it must have been so much fun, Todd, for you, because then you could cut, the making of the clothes and the thing, and the top plate and the foot and how it moves the albums to sort of, it's all the same piece of music. You were able to sort of color on the music that she was creating in the interview. That's the way it felt to me. Like I was watching this first musical piece, and then the movie never let me down because it maintained this symphonic quality all the way to the very end.
But that, can I say, Bradley, that was actually, when I first read the script, Todd's script, I had a conniption because I thought, page one, what is she talking about? I mean, I knew obviously what she was talking about, but the specifics of what she was talking about, I had the 26 volumes of the English dictionary, thank God, and I started to pull them off, and I thought, I have to read this thing before I try and dissect it. And then I realized very quickly it makes rhythmic sense. And I think that's an interesting thing for an audience. It's why the film that Todd has made is hypnotic in a way, because it bypasses this frontal cortex, and that it sometimes things that seem to be operating in a very cerebral way, in the way that music, when people discuss music, it's a language in and of itself, but it hits you in the solar plexus. It hits you across time and space. And the screenplay itself did that. But then the way Todd was shooting it is that, you were very specific about the rhythm in which every character would walk. And so he created this contrapuntal rhythms, the way Sharon's rhythm versus Lydia's rhythm versus Olga's rhythm, so that was very much kind of, we didn't always talk about the psychology behind the characters. We talked about circumstances a lot, but we talked about the characters in musical terms. So that was kind of, it was a sort of a shorthand often to, because sometimes you can over psychologize when in fact you need to understand it on a deeper level somehow. If that makes sense.
The thing I think that I always strive for is to create something that hits somebody in a level that's hard to put into words. I mean, film at its best is music, and it's what Lenny says in your film. The thing that you want, there are words that you can't use to describe how you feel, and that's when music comes in. That's this film. That's the highest possible bar one can achieve, I think, cinema.
I think and the other thing that, the thing about the psychology of it, though, is music too. I mean, in that, when Nina said that she would do this, and I'm thrilled for you. If you're not that familiar with Nina Haas's work, you're in for an incredible treat, Bradley. She's like a great hero for many, including Cate and I. We were just thrilled when she said that she would play this part. But the one thing that she said when I spoke to her the first time, with very sweaty palms, I was just like, oh no, she's not going to want to do it. She said, I'll do it, but there's this thing I think you might do a little differently, which is a very Nina way of saying you've gotten it wrong here. And what she was talking about was this idea of this character who holds a great deal of sort of secret power, and that she's the concertmaster. And as you know, especially in a German orchestra these days, a democratic orchestra, really she holds the power. I mean, Lydia is the face, but really the political currency and thereby the grace of Sharon is Lydia. Comes from that concertmaster. So she said there's a level of complicity here that's very, very important. She gets things that she wants with a look or a suggestion because she knows that she's got a partner who will do all the dirty work, right? So even when they say, when she says, I'm worried about Petra, she's coming home with bruises on her shins. That's all she has to say. She knows that that her partner has very, very little patience for anything that doesn't, align with her schedule, and she's a completion junkie, and she's going to just take care of it. So it was like that was a very smart and important thing for Nina to point out, because we would go through and not try to get caught, but definitely hang a lantern on these moments between the two of them. And that was a very, very rich conversation between the three of us, and really made a gigantic difference from what the screenplay was initially.
And I would say that you as a filmmaker told that story too, because she was, there were so many moments when you go to her, when we've seen something occur that we may be intuiting something or understanding, and then you go to Nina, and whatever her expression is sort of lets us know, oh yeah, we are right.
Right. That's right. She affords us a very, very important point of view in terms of how does someone that knows this person better than we do, because we've just met her, we get in late, we're with her for 3 weeks. She's been with her for years. How does she feel about her? What is she allowing? What is she accommodating? What is she ignoring, and why? And then trying to figure that out as well, because there's really only 4 points of view available in the film, and that's a key point of view.
Absolutely. And she's our confidant. We trust her.
Exactly. We trust her.
Oh, yeah.
Be careful who you trust in this movie.
Yes.
That's what I would say. No one's entirely trustworthy.
That heart medication?
Yes.
Yeah, beta blockers. Yeah.
Beta blockers. I mean, and if you've ever been around someone who's got a fear of flying, you have to have a little bit of empathy, I think.
It's a very common thing for orchestra players. Many of them take beta blockers before they go on stage. Calm themselves down. It's if you talk to players, if they're comfortable with you, they'll admit that.
So.
Nina, do you play the violin?
I don't play it privately, but I had the luxury to be asked to play a violinist twice before, and I have a fantastic teacher, and we could start on a different level, so that at the end of the day, this time around, I really managed to play to have the fingering right for these pieces of Mahler, that you see in the film. So, but it was a blast, honestly. It sounds like it was a tremendous work, but it helped so much working on it. And at the end of the day, sitting in the orchestra with all the professional musicians and getting their respect on a personal level was also very gratifying. And you can kind of fly with them, and you don't feel so bad if you stand up and go, that's how you got to do it, guys. They're kind of like, yeah, okay, she put the work in,
Because the thing that people won't also know is that orchestra at this level, whether it's your orchestra, the LSO, the Berlin Philharmonic, the New York, you're talking about every single player is a unicorn. They've been doing it since they are the best in their county, city, state, country at this. And my experience and I'm sure it was the same, you walk into that room, they don't care at all. Like, at least that was experience. Yeah. And to get their respect was so monumental. And I can't even imagine, so for you to be the concertmaster in this real orchestra, I can't even imagine, and that you have to play, whether it's fingering or anything, that you weren't shaking doing it, because you're around all of these unicorns who are the best at what they do. I thought surely you must be a violinist, because how could you even breathe, quite honestly?
What really helped? The real concertmaster was sitting right next to me. You see him in the film, Wolfgang Hendrich. And he was so with me the whole time. So all my fear that I had slowly slipped away, until you can see a moment in the film where he goes like, and follows me. I hadn't seen it, but when I saw it in the film, I was like, oh my God, I just love it. Thank you so much.
They were so generous. They were really generous.
So generous.
But as you say, Bradley, they, orchestra members, particularly tenured orchestra members, they sniff the inauthentic. And I think we got, obviously Wolfgang was incredible, and the generosity and curiosity of the entire orchestra and the administration was profound. And Todd, we wouldn't have been able to do it without them. But I think they really knew from the beginning that Todd was after a very genuine, authentic experience. And that because it's not a performance movie, it's about process, it's about rehearsal. That we had to, Nina and I mean, Sophie Cower is an extraordinary young cellist, but we had to rehearse. And so it was art imitating life. We couldn't apologize for the need to rehearse, and we demanded that space. And so in a way, I think they thought, okay, well, these people are serious. They're not, because I asked you very early on, Todd, I said, so how are you going to shoot the rehearsrsal scenes? And you sort of looked at me like I was speaking another language. You said, I'm going to shoot it. And meaning I thought, okay, well, there's nowhere to hide. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that they realized that initially, and they had to act, so everyone was outside their comfort zone.
Well, it was interesting because they're very, careful with us, the circus people, the funny circus people that come in. But I remember after like the third day of rehearsal, I remember a couple of players who were a little more demonstrative initially came up. They were kind of, letting us know what the temperature was, and they said, "The orchestra really loves this. The orchestra is so amazed at how hard you all work and how organized you are, and it's not what they would have ever imagined it was to make a film. And they see you're just running and you're working 10 hours straight and you're not stopping, and you're as exacting and as relentless as we are, in our rehearsals." And after that, it was very, very different, and it was nice. It was nice to get to that point where we were dancing, and Cate has said this before, that orchestra had not been able to play the entire pandemic. They hadn't been able to be near each other. So this was sort of like a homecoming. And the first time that she got up, you should tell this story. It's a very funny story.
No, the first time we got up, because of course they hadn't played the big orchestral works. They played chamber pieces, and half of the orchestra members were masked, which is so difficult, and they were separated from one another, so the sound was entirely different. I mean, the acoustics in the hall were amazing, but they're so used to being cheek by jowl, and so they were back together playing Mahler. And so you start with the Trauermarsch and give the downbeat, which I knew was clear, and they were off. I think they thought they could do it without me. And so I just stopped and I said, let's start again. And everyone laughed. And they realized, in fact, we kind of had to do this thing together. And so it really broke the ice. It's because there is that sense sometimes, with so many guest conductors coming in with a tenured orchestra, that it's like, oh, they're not a very clear beater, or they're too expressive, or why are they putting that tremolo stroke here when it should be legato or whatever? And then they make those decisions, but they realized, in fact, that they were slightly out of practice. And it's and they're brilliant musicians, but it was a very, very funny kind of bonding moment.
That must have been, and that's so true to life. So you just took them right to the reality of a rehearsal.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it was great.
Why, Todd? What made you? Why this profession? What made you choose this profession to explore all of these myriad themes that we were able to benefit from watching you explore?
Well, it was really just as simple as I'd been thinking about her for an awfully long time, for many years. But I'm always, if you're lucky to get, I read a statistic in Variety, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, that if you're being paid to write a screenplay, you have a better chance of starting in an MBA lineup. So I feel lucky to have been paid to write at all. But normally, as a practical matter, people want to kind of have an understanding of what it is they're going to get. So you're adapting other people's material unless you write a spec script. And I've never had that large of a runway or that large of a bank account to be able to take 4 months off and write a spec script. So I kind of figured this character was going to sit in a notebook someplace and maybe never see the light of day unless I, started writing fiction or something. And then at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2022, the studio kind of said, we have this idea for a conductor in classical music. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. They said, well, what's your take on it? I don't have a take. they said, okay, well, can you tell us anything about it? I said, no, you just trust me. And they said, okay. And that was it. And so I got to bring her out, and the character, I'd always imagined sitting on the top of some kind of power structure, and this was it's the perfect illustration. I mean, you have a triangle, and you're in a frame, and it's Mount Olympus, and you're throwing down thunderbolts, and you're.
When you see Von Karajan's, recordings, trying to make music look beautiful, and those top shots, if you look at the videos that he's made of him conducting, it's definitely, you get that Mount Olympus feel.
Yeah, for sure. And the sort of introduction to your character, which is you can't get more exalted than that. The camera is literally as low on the floor as it can on an 18mm lens, looking at this gigantic human being coming at you, throwing sound, right into the camera. So it was so it was as simple as that. I mean, we talked about this, the three of us, many times, such as she could have ran a media company. She could have been the head of any kind of geo situation, a energy company, anything. But it would have been would have very different treatment of this character, than having her be a conductor. So it was really just that.
I would go as far as to say that your task would have been much, much easier if you had chosen those professions cinematically. And I think that you made it as difficult as you possibly could, because and I think that's why, I've talked about this movie with so many people, and everybody has so many different understandings of what this scene or that scene, and they want to talk about it for hours, because it's that thing Lenny says in the movie, that thing one feels that only music can explain. And that's what this movie, from the very beginning to the end of the guide saying, don't judge, is music. I watched music. I felt music. I devoured music. And that is a gift you, all three, and the rest of the people that worked on the film gave all of us, that I will treasure for the rest of my life. It will inspire me to keep going in those dark days where I feel like it's not worth it.
Well, I mean, music, it's such a conduit or a pathway, isn't it? It's such a transformative medium, and and I felt often that the character was trying to sort of transcend often the banalities of life or the political situations in which we find ourselves enmeshed, particularly when you're running a major cultural institution, or the corporeal, and sort of commune with the spiritual, which is, you can be transmogrified or transported by music. And I mean, you don't have to be a conductor to feel that. You don't even really need to be a musician. I mean, it's why we put our headphones on and try and escape,
Yes, but if you can tell a story where it has that someone on that Mount Olympus for us to receive, that's what a gift. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing your film and see you on the podium.
Yeah. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
I want to be sitting down with you right now.
It really is a privilege to see all of you three and enjoy your work. It was really it was a life-changing thing seeing your film. Period. That's just the way it was.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.